Hey guys, tonight we're heading back, way back. Picture yourself standing barefoot in the middle of an ancient Sumerian street. The clay beneath your feet is warm from the sun, but also a little squishy. It rained last night, and now every step makes a soft slurp. The air hums with buzzing flies and the distant bleating of sheep. Someone's burning something pungent nearby, possibly incense, possibly dinner. Either way, you won't ask questions. You're in Ur, one of the oldest cities on earth, and it's a chaotic wonder of mud bricks, flat rooftops, and an absurd number of goats. The year is somewhere around 2400 BCE, give or take a royal conquest. You live in a world without Wi Fi, coffee, or the concept of weekends. You're not thriving, but you are surviving. And tonight, we are following your journey not as a warrior, not as a king, but as something arguably more important, a scribe, a person who learns to shape clay into memory, into math, into proof. You, dear listener, are about to invent the receipt. And no, you probably won't survive this career path with all your fingers intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from somewhere far off or fascinating, drop your location and your local time in the comments below. I love seeing where all of you are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun is already blazing over Ur's eastern walls as you trudge out of your family's small two-room mud brick home. You nod to your neighbor, who is loudly chasing a goat down the lane. Classic. The streets are alive with voices, traders shouting, temple servants carrying baskets, and children rolling clay balls for a game that will later somehow be blamed on demons. You've got bigger problems. You've just been selected for apprenticeship at the Great Temple Granary. At the ripe old age of maybe 15, age records are fuzzy in Sumer. You're about to start your training in record keeping. Not glamorous, perhaps, but vital. You're entering a world where nothing happens without counting. And here, in ancient Sumer, math isn't just a school subject. It's the glue that holds civilization together. You walk past towering date palms and an elderly woman selling sesame cakes from a woven tray. Ahead of you looms the ziggurat, a layered pyramid rising from the earth like a stack of sleeping giants. At its base are storerooms, workshops, and your destination? The granary offices. Inside, it's surprisingly cool. Thick mud brick walls keep the worst of the heat out, and the smell of barley mash hangs in the air. You're led into a side room where an elderly scribe with ink-stained fingers eyes you up and down. He grunts and points to a low bench beside a stack of clay tablets. Welcome to your new life. The system is simple, he says. Then immediately begins talking in a dizzying mix of Sumerian terms, number bases, and pictographic shorthand. Your head spins. You learn that the economy runs on barley. Not coins, not shells, barley. It's paid to workers, offered to gods, traded for goats, and stored in great vaulted rooms under the temple's eye. And barley has to be counted, which means receipts. Receipts don't look like modern paper slips. Oh no, they're thumb-sized pieces of clay, still slightly damp, into which scribes press tiny wedge-shaped marks using a stylus made from a reed. Each mark says something: who gave what to whom, how much, and when. Once written, the clay is left to dry or baked in the sun, and just like that, it becomes permanent. You try your hand at shaping a tablet. It does not go well. The clay sticks to your fingers, your symbols look like a toddler lost a fight with a bird, and your stylus keeps snapping. The older scribe sighs heavily. You'll either learn, he mutters, or the gods will recycle you into a roof tile. Still, by the end of your first day, you've managed to copy a simple entry. 10 measures of barley, received by Temple of Nana from Alulu the brewer. It's wonky, but legible. Barely, and Alulu won't know the difference. This might seem like bureaucratic drudgery, but what you're doing is revolutionary. Sumerians are among the first people in human history to write things down, not for poetry, not for storytelling, but for accounting. Historians still argue whether writing emerged for language's sake or for the sake of receipts, but the evidence leans hard toward Bali based bookkeeping. You spend your nights practicing stylus strokes in damp clay. Your friends laugh. They're learning to fish, to fight, to weave sandals. You're learning how to draw stylized sheep, but you know something they don't. In Sumer, memory is power, and clay remembers everything. One morning, you're asked to accompany a temple official to the storehouse. It's your first field trip, and you're pumped until you realize it's just more barley. So much barley, bags and baskets and jars of it, piled high and humming with little weevils. You watch as the official oversees a delivery. A farmer named Ninsigun presents two large sacks. The contents are carefully weighed using stone weights and a balance beam. Then the official turns to you. Record it, he says, and don't mess up the name again. Last week you called her a goat. She was not amused. So you write, 2 measures of barley received from Ninsigun the farmer stored in bin 3. You press the temple seal over it, a carved cylinder rolled across the wet clay like a fancy pasta stamp. That seal is everything. It turns your scribbles into law. Ninsigun squints at the tablet, then nods. Deal done. She leaves, barleyless but satisfied, and you realize you've just helped facilitate a transaction older than money itself. You, the kid who once misspelled cow. As the sun sets, you sit in the courtyard, hands sore and fingers smudged with clay dust. The ziggurat casts a long shadow across the plaza. You exhale. You didn't expect this path. Receipts, styluses, goat errors, but something about it feels important. Because in a world of barter and belief, someone has to remember. Someone has to write it down. And tonight, that someone is you. You wake to the sound of someone loudly arguing with a chicken. It's not your chicken. It's not even your neighbor's chicken. But somehow, it's gotten into your courtyard, and now 2 grown adults are locked in a passionate debate over whose fault that is. Welcome back to Or, where mornings come with mystery, poultry, and afternoons come with math. You brush the straw from your tunic, rub the clay dust from your eyes, and get ready for another day under the stern eye of the temple granary. Today, you've been promised a crash course in Sumerian economics, or what passes for it in a world where money doesn't exist yet. Barley. It always comes back to barley. Your mentor greets you with his usual enthusiasm, which is to say, none. He shoves a worn tablet toward you. What do you see? He grunts. You squint at the drying clay. There's a cluster of wedge shapes in columns. You can make out symbols for numbers, a couple of person marks, and a curious curved stroke that looks like someone tried to draw a bent thumb. You hazard a guess. 12 measures of barley, too. Someone who likes bent thumbs, he sighs. Number. It's 12 measures to a brewer. That curved mark is beer, or sometimes a curse. Depends on context. You nod solemnly as though this makes perfect sense. In Sumer, barley is currency. You're not just counting food, you're counting labor, wealth, and obligation. Workers are paid in barley. Officials are gifted barley. Gods are bribed with barley. If you try to sneak into a pub and pay with bronze coins, they'd probably laugh you out of the courtyard and throw a radish at your head. So you learn how payments work. A farmer brings grain. You weigh it with those heavy stone standards and you record exactly how much is handed over and to whom. The clay tablet acts like a one-time contract. Once it's written and sealed, it's official. Burn it in the sun and it's permanent. Like taxes, or that one time you tried to draw a donkey and it looked like a person melting. But here's the strange part. There's no coin purse, no wallets. You don't walk around with barley in your pockets, partly because barley is bulky and also because you don't have pockets. Instead, trust is everything. temple issued rations, sealed containers, tallies scratched into clay. This is your economy. You sit at your assigned bench, scratching numbers into a new tablet. 6 measures barley, worker ration, assigned to dock laborer. That labor will take this to the storeroom and exchange it for literal sacks of grain. You smile at the absurdity. Congratulations. You're basically an ancient HR department. Your mentor drops a heavier tablet next to you. This one is thick, smooth, and covered on both sides with tiny marks. Now this, he says, is a shipment log. Took 2 weeks to copy. You stare in awe. The writing is so dense it could double as a doorstop. It details grain payments to dozens of workers across a temple construction site. Who got what, when, and why. And it's all in barley. Historians still argue whether this system counts as money. After all, it isn't standardized coinage, but it does function as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. 3 things every economy needs. And unlike digital banking today, this system is incredibly hard to hack. You'd need to forge clay, duplicate seals, and know how to mimic someone's stylus flourish. Even the best scammers usually just misplace a goat. You're interrupted by a shout. A merchant storms into the granary, red-faced and covered in dust. He's waving a receipt tablet and shouting something about being shorted on his barley payment. A crowd gathers. The temple official rolls his eyes and waves you over. Get his tablet. We'll compare. You take the man's tablet, carefully turning it in your hands. The surface is sun-hardened, the symbols sharp. A goat seal, a small, elegant cylinder stamp, adorns the bottom. You flip it to the back and notice something odd. The quantity symbols are slightly off-center. The spacing is tighter, less confident. A forgery? You fetch the temple's own logbook. Together with your mentor, you compare the 2 tablets. Identical at first glance. But then, in the second line, a different scribe's a stylus mark stands out. Yours? Number thankfully. It's someone else's mistake. The official frowns, then breaks into a grin. You try to cheat the temple? On, barley. He laughs, clapping the merchant on the shoulder like they're old friends. The merchant goes pale. 2 guards quietly escort him away. Your mentor turns to you, chuckling. People think writing is about words, but it's really about accountability. The day ends with you back at your bench, etching small triangles into fresh clay. The rhythm is calming. Press, lift, press, lift. You find yourself relaxing into it. Outside, the city winds down. The market quiets. A stray donkey wanders by your window, and you reflect on this strange, dusty civilization you're part of. It's not just barley and balance beams, it's trust, codified in clay. Proof that someone gave, someone received, and someone watched it happen. You think of modern receipts, crumpled, forgotten, stuffed into wallets. Here in Sumer, every receipt is a lifeline, a promise, a story etched in earth. And tonight, you're the one telling that story, one little wedge at a time. You're standing ankle deep in barley again. This time, it's not metaphorical. It's literal. A basket split in the storeroom, and now the temple floor looks like breakfast for 1,000 pigeons. You are sent to observe today's delivery tallies, not to become an accidental grain wader. But here we are. An older priest shuffles past you, muttering something about clumsy scribes and angry storage gods. You respectfully nod and pretend not to exist. Once the mess is half contained, you pull out your stylus and a fresh clay tablet. Today's job match in income and inventories with a written record. A scribe isn't just a writer. You're part detective, part math nerd, part sacred librarian. You take a deep breath and begin your tally. 15 jars of sesame oil, 30 bricks of salt, 7 live goats. Wait, make that 6. One just wandered off. Inventory logs in Sumer are wonderfully complex. Each item gets its own unit of measurement. And those units don't convert cleanly. Oil is measured in something like liters, barley in weight, livestock in heads, and workers in portions of food. It's your job to translate the chaos into tidy rows of marks, proof that the gods are being properly paid and nobody's sneaking extra sheep out the back. As you press symbols into clay, your mentor reminds you of something important. These receipts aren't just for today. Some will be stored for months, years even. If a priest 3 summers from now needs to know why the temple has 17 extra jars of honey, this little clay tile will hold the answer. And that's where things get tricky. See, Sumerian tablets don't just say honey or goats. They use pictographs, small abstract images that represent not just objects but entire concepts. Over time, these symbols evolve. The drawing for barley begins as a stalk with grain heads and gradually becomes a stylized triangle with lines. Goat turns into something that looks vaguely like a birthday balloon with legs. You're expected to memorize hundreds of these signs. Some are straightforward, others are interpretive, like tax being represented by a jar tipped over, or debtor being a man sitting under a curved line that might be a yoke, or might just be a lazy crescent moon. You once accidentally confused silver with dung. It made for a very awkward temple offering record. Your stylus moves slowly now, carefully replicating the correct symbol for sesame oil, not butter, not goat fat. Sesame oil. Because the last time someone confused the two, a priest used the wrong one in a ritual and smelled like roasted goat for a week. Outside the storeroom, you hear the unmistakable squeal of a cart's wheels. Another delivery. You brace yourself for more counting. But this one's different. It's a shipment from a nearby village. Tribute from a minor chief. He's sent woven mats, dyed wool, and, interestingly, a sealed container of fermented date wine. The official cracks open the seal with ceremonial flair. The smell hits you like a fermented sandal. Everyone takes a polite step back. You jot down the items, noting the chief's mark on the seal, a stylized fish over a triangle. Tribal symbols are their own sublanguage, and deciphering them is part of your job too. Each seal is like a signature, rolled into clay using a carved cylinder that leaves an image behind. Historians still argue whether these seals represent individuals or whole families, and whether the more complex ones were reserved for aristocrats. But one thing is clear: the seal makes the message official. Without it, a receipt is just a suggestion. As you press the symbol into the tablet, the official pats your shoulder. This, my friend, is how trade happens, he says. Not with shouting, not with swords, with seals and styluses. You nod, half covered in barley dust, feeling strangely important. That night back at home, you sit by the fire and study your collection of broken tablets, your old practice scraps. Some are laughably bad. One includes a reversed symbol for grain, which accidentally means moldy dirt. Another has your name spelled in 3 different ways, all wrong. But there's progress too. Your strokes are sharper now. You're spacing better. You've learned to read numbers in both base 60 and base 10. Because, yes, the Sumerians couldn't settle on just one number system. They used both, often in the same tablet, because why not make things weird? There's even a logic to it. 60 divides neatly by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, perfect for merchants dealing in portions. Still, it means you've had to learn how to write 1/3 of a goat in a mathematically correct way, which raises more questions than it answers. As the fire crackles low, you run your fingers over the clay. Each wedge, each dot, each line, it all adds up to something more than a list. It's a record, a memory, a promise made solid. The rest of the world mayn't notice your work. To them, you're just a quiet figure hunched over a slab of dirt. But in 5 years, when someone wants to know exactly how many jars of date wine were delivered from Chief Fish Triangle, they'll have you to thank. And if they can't read your symbols, well, they'll just have to trust you. You're half awake when the temple bell rings. Long, low, and echoing across the rooftops. That means a special audit is underway. You groan softly into your pillow mat. Audits mean questions. Questions mean revisiting old records, and revisiting old records means spending your day in the temple archive, a place that smells like dust, clay, and a hint of moldy goat. You trudge there anyway, because in Sumer, your receipts don't vanish after the transaction. They're baked, shelved, and preserved. Clay tablets can last forever, assuming you don't drop them on your foot. You did that once. It hurt more than you're proud to admit. The archive is a surprisingly sophisticated place. Long rows of cubbyholes, each filled with tablets of all sizes. Some are fat and square, others long and slim like dried sausages. Many are wrapped in clay envelopes. Yes, envelopes made of clay. You run your fingers over one. It's a sealed message, with its own tablet tucked inside like a secret. To read it, you'd have to break the outer shell. But the envelope also carries a summary of the contents, sort of like writing a tweet on the outside of your email. It's efficient, if a bit heavy. You're assigned to help an auditor named Nina Zag. She's stern, fastidious, and terrifyingly good at spotting errors. She hands you a list of tablets to retrieve. Grain tallies from 3 years ago, during a time when the river flooded and messed with all the delivery schedules. As you hunt through the shelves, you marvel again at the complexity of it all. These aren't just records, they're threads in a vast bureaucratic tapestry. Each receipt tablet might reference a shipment that connects to a temple feast, which connects to a work crew, which connects to a public monument. You're not just keeping track of goods, you're keeping track of a civilization's heartbeat. You finally find one of the tablets you're looking for. It's cracked at the edge, but the symbols are still legible. It reads, 17 jars of date wine from Utulugal delivered to the priestess's festival ration fund. You take it back to Ninazak. She scans it, then frowns. Where's the matching outflow record? She asks. You blink. The what? The outflow. If 17 jars came in, some were served. Show me where we documented that. You're not sure. You return to the shelves and dig deeper. Eventually, you find another tablet. 7 jars, distributed to festival workers, 10 reserved for offering. Bingo. But there's a wrinkle. This tablet is from a different scribe, and it spells Utulugal's name as Utulaga. It's a small change, just one wedge stroke difference. But that's enough to cause concern. Historians still debate whether scribes had standardized spelling. Some argue that variations were accepted, like regional accents. Others insist that each deviation carried meaning. All you know is that Ninazag is not amused. She sends you to fetch both tablets, seal impressions. The seals, those precious cylinder stamps, are often the only way to verify identity. Each official has their own seal, carved in reverse, so it rolls out an image when pressed into soft clay. Sometimes the seal includes names, sometimes just symbols, lions, eagles, stars, or elaborate geometries that look like someone got very bored in math class. You fetch the seals, compare them, and breathe a sigh of relief. Both tablets share the same lion within a moon seal, probably the same Utu, just a sloppy speller. Ninazag nods grudgingly. Acceptable, she says, which is her highest praise. Lunch arrives, lentil cakes and a warm barley drink. You eat while staring at a damaged tablet. Half the symbols have been worn away. It's like looking at a puzzle with missing pieces. You can make out measures of flour and a worker named Enlil Kid, but without the rest, it's useless. Still, damaged tablets aren't always garbage. Sometimes they're used for training. You once practiced reconstructing missing lines based on formulaic patterns. After all, most receipts follow predictable templates. It's like ancient Mad Libs. X measures of Y given to Z on the Wth day of month Q. You make a mental note to practice more. Maybe try reconstructing that damaged tablet tomorrow. You're finally starting to enjoy the challenge. By late afternoon, your fingers are stained with clay and your eyes feel like boiled lentils. But there's something deeply satisfying about the archive. It's quiet, it's steady, and unlike the noisy markets or unpredictable riverbanks, the tablets don't lie. You run your fingers over one of them again. It's cool and solid. Someone's entire week is recorded here. How many days they worked, what they received in return, and who authorized the payment. No pomp, no poetry. Just the facts. Just the truth. Or close enough for government work. As you leave the archive, the sun dips low behind the ziggurat. The stone steps cast long shadows across the plaza. You pause at the edge of the temple gate, staring back at the structure behind you. Inside, thousands of tablets whisper their stories from silent shelves. Transactions, deliveries, mistakes, audits, lives, all written down, all remembered. You smile faintly. Because someday, long after your own tablet is shelved and forgotten, someone else will trace the wedge-shaped marks you left behind and try to figure out who you were. And hopefully, they won't confuse your name with a type of goat. The sun is already beating down by the time you step into the open-air courtyard behind the temple, where a line of laborers waits to receive their monthly rations. This is another one of your duties. Recording worker payments, not in coins or shiny ingots, but in very practical portions of food, oil, beer, and occasionally textiles. Because in Sumer, you don't get paid money, you get paid stuff. You scratch your head and pick up the first clay tablet from your basket. This one tracks payments for a group of reed cutters who've just finished their stint by the marshlands. Their skin is sun-darkened, and they still smell faintly of wet plants and frog spawn. They hand you their names, and you cross-reference them against a roster. Abulum received 3 measures of barley, 1 measure of oil, 2 jars of beer. You mutter, confirming the data with the overseer beside you. Make sure to record the half-day absence. The overseer adds, pointing at a lanky man with a sunburned nose. He went fishing when he shouldn't have. You dutifully mark a small symbol beside the entry, half an inverted triangle, meaning a deduction. The man sighs but says nothing. Everyone understands the rules. The concept of a receipt is different here. It isn't just about goods moving in and out, it's about labor rendered, expectations fulfilled, and reputations upheld. The temple complex functions like a business, a community center, and a government office rolled into one. Your clay tablet is proof that everyone's doing their part. The temple scribe beside you gives you a nudge. You didn't write the beer symbol clearly, she whispers, pointing to your faint wedge. That looks like vinegar. You sigh and fix it. In Sumer, confusing beer and vinegar is a social crime. One tastes like celebration, the other like punishment. By mid-morning, your tablet is full. You dry it gently in the sun before it goes to the kiln for baking. Not every receipt is baked. Some are just dried and stored, but important ones, especially those involving high-value rations, get fired in ovens to make them permanent. It's like laminating your tax returns in ceramic. Historians still argue whether these receipts were for short-term use or long-term tracking. Some suggest they were purely practical. Others think they were also symbolic, a way of showing the gods that society was being just and orderly. You lean toward the latter. Mostly because every task in the temple eventually circles back to the gods, even beer handouts. Later that day, you get called to a small storage annex near the ziggurat. The roof leaks slightly and the floor smells like sour grain. A farmer from the outskirts has come in, claiming he delivered a shipment of onions a week ago and never got his full ration in return. There's a hint of desperation in his voice. Onions aren't glamorous, but they're worth enough to feed a family for days. You shuffle through a pile of unbaked tablets, fingers searching for his name. You find it, barely legible, but there. The original receipt shows a delivery of 4 baskets. The return payment recorded only accounts for 3, a scribal error or a case of temple-side skimming. It's impossible to say. You make a note in today's record. Farmer Lagash received 1 extra measure of barley to correct previous shortfall. No accusation, no fuss. Just a quiet fix in the paperwork. The farmer bows his thanks and leaves, onion-stained satchel swinging. That evening, you return to the scribe's chamber. You and the others work in near silence. The only sound the light scratch of styluses on clay and the occasional sneeze from inhaled dust. One of the new apprentices complains under her breath. Why do we keep everything? I mean, who's ever going to read this again? You smile, thinking of the archive, of Nina Zag's frown, of the farmer's almost missing onions. Someone will, you say. Maybe not today, maybe not ever, but it matters. She rolls her eyes, but she doesn't stop writing. You finish your final tablet of the day, a record of oil usage for temple lanterns. It's dull work. Just a list of containers and the scribe who approved their use. But you add a final line, as you were taught. Recorded on the 18th day of the month of the fox by the hand of Enkidu Lam, scribe of the 4th order. That's your name. And while it's not carved in a statue or sung by a bard, it's etched in clay. That's enough. You smooth the final wedge and set the tablet on the drying shelf where it joins dozens of others waiting to be fired. Tomorrow, they'll be hardened into permanence. Not art, not poetry, but something just as enduring. Truth in wedge-shaped strokes. As the oil lamps dim and your eyes grow heavy, you wonder who'll read your records in 1,000 years. And whether they'll laugh when they see how many times you confused beer and vinegar. The courtyard is quieter than usual this morning. The usual clatter of carts and murmured haggling is missing. Instead, there's a strange hush, like everyone's holding their breath. You find out why soon enough. The grain delivery from the northern fields is late. Again, you're called to the temple's logistics chamber, a small side room with low benches, shelves full of tally tablets, and an enormous clay map carved into the wall. It's old and a bit inaccurate. Rivers bend the wrong way. Cities float in odd places, but it helps the scribes visualize the flow of goods. Your supervisor points at a line on the map that represents the barley route from Kish. This shipment is supposed to be here, he says, tapping a mark beside your city. It's not. You're handed a reed stylus and assigned to review the last 4 months of transport receipts. Not glamorous work, but important. The temple has to figure out whether the delay is a fluke or the start of a barley drought. You settle into the low light of the records chamber. Tablets spread out like tiles before you. Each one has that familiar rhythm. 20 baskets of barley, dispatched from Kish, marked with the seal of Galzu, transported by raft, received by Enlil Bani on the 5th day of the month of rain. It's amazing how much information they pack into such small space. You imagine these scribes years ago, hunched over damp clay, trying to wedge in one more line before the surface dried, probably muttering the Sumerian equivalent of, "I need a bigger font." You notice something peculiar. 3 months ago, a series of barley receipts suddenly start including a different name. The rafts are now coming from a man named Tudu Sin, not Galzu, and the quantities drop. By a few baskets at first, then more. Curious, you follow the trail of seals. Galzu's seal had a stylized fish wrapped around a star, elegant and confident. Tudusin's seal is a goat climbing a hill. Less majestic, more chaotic. Historians still debate what these seal symbols really meant. Were they totemic animals, status symbols, or just inside jokes? One theory you like. The more ridiculous the image, the more powerful the owner. Because who's going to laugh at the man who pays your wages? You take the tablets to Ninazag. She studies the seal impressions, then arches an eyebrow. Tudusin is new, probably less reliable, or perhaps siphoning. Skimming grain? You ask. It's happened before. She replies too calmly. There's no proof, of course. But when a seal changes, and the amounts drop, and the rafts take longer to arrive. Patterns emerge. You note it down. That becomes a new tablet, an internal memo of sorts requesting further investigation. You'll probably have to speak to the port official tomorrow. For now, you return to your desk and begin crafting a cross-reference tablet. Which shipments came when, from whom, and in what amount. It's painstaking. You have to triple-check spellings, because even a single stroke off and your whole chart collapses. More than once, you have to squint at two nearly identical names. One ends in Zeta, the other in Zeta. A tiny wedge shape makes all the difference between two very real and possibly very offended people. You think back to that goat seal and chuckle under your breath. Then pause. What if your seal someday ends up making someone laugh in the future? You haven't designed one yet. Maybe something impressive. A lion biting the sun? Too much. A humble reed stylus crossed with a barley stalk? That's more your speed. The rest of the afternoon is spent reorganizing older records from the time of the King's Jubilee. That was a good year. Plenty of grain, no floods, and 3 major temple festivals. You find a tablet marked with a rare stamp. Royal oversight approved. That's temple speak for don't mess with this data. You still triple check it. You wonder if anyone back then realized just how closely their shipments would be scrutinized. Every tablet they wrote still sits here, tucked into dusty shelves, waiting to be consulted. It makes you pause before pressing your next stylus mark. You want it to be just right. It's almost dusk when you step outside, rubbing the clay dust from your hands. The delay in grain delivery hasn't resolved itself, but at least you've uncovered a pattern. That's the thing about receipts in Zoom. They don't just show what happened. They show what keeps happening, and that's something future scribes will need to know. You walk past the workers' courtyard, where a cook stirs a pot of barley stew. The smell is comforting, nutty, warm. You wonder if any of that barley came from Tudusin's shipment. Probably. Hopefully not the spoiled batch. As the stars appear overhead, tiny pinpricks in a dusty purple sky, you pause beneath the temple's stone arch. You take one last mental note of the day's events. Tomorrow, you'll write your summary tablet. You'll press your seal carefully, and that small clay square will join a growing mountain of knowledge, each piece brittle, weighty, and endlessly significant. Funny, isn't it? You live in a world where grain is king, goats climb hills, and a well-written receipt might just outlast your entire civilization. Morning arrives with a dry breeze and the distant clatter of river traffic. You're up early, not by choice, but because you've been summoned to the docks. Apparently, another grain shipment has arrived, and this time, you're meant to witness the unloading firsthand. No pressure. You tug your linen tunic straight and trudge past the temple gates, down the slope toward the wharf. The path smells like wet clay and fish guts. Rivermen shout to each other, ropes creak, and reeds brush against your legs. The Euphrates looks lazy this morning, broad brown and glittering with that fake sense of calm you've come to distrust. At the dock, you find the barge already tied up. It's a long, flat vessel with curved ends, stacked with baskets covered in woven lids. 2 scribes from the port office are already there, looking more annoyed than alert. One of them waves you over. "We're short again," she mutters. "Manifest says 80 baskets. Counted 73. You glance at the tablet in her hand. It's still damp, freshly inscribed. The seal pressed into the bottom corner is unmistakable. The goat on the hill, your friend, Tudusin. So the drop in shipments isn't theoretical anymore. It's literal. And now you're supposed to record this one too. You kneel beside a fresh clay tablet and begin pressing the familiar script. Received 73 baskets of barley. Shipment incomplete. Seal of Tudusin affixed. You make sure to carve the numbers clearly. No ambiguity. 73 is not 78. It's not even 74. It is undeniably short. As you write, A porter passes by with a broken basket. Grain leaks from a gash in the side like sand through fingers. Careful! Someone barks. The porter shrugs. Blame the rats. Rats are always the scapegoat. Sometimes, literally. There's an entire section in one old receipt log blaming the will of Enlil and a sudden increase in rodents. You file that one mentally under. Nice try. Still, historians continue to debate how accurate these records were. Some argue that temple receipts were almost ritualistic, recorded not just for accounting, but to satisfy divine expectations of order. Others believe they were practical tools first, spiritual later. You suspect it's a bit of both, especially when rats get involved. You shadow the dock workers as they unload. You count each basket. You glance at weight markers scratched onto the sides. You sniff a few. Yes, sniff, because spoiled grain smells wrong, sour, moldy. There's no need for fancy equipment when your nose works just fine. One of the baskets is suspiciously light. You open it to find it packed mostly with straw and a thin layer of barley spread across the top like a toupee. The porter next to you winces. That wasn't me, he insists. You write a note on a side tablet. You are now officially the scribe who caught a barley. Later, you sit with the port overseer, a leathery man who wears his beard in two tight braids. He flips through a few old shipment tablets, grunting with each one. Used to be Galzu's name on every raft, he says. Now it's this goat guy. Never met him. That raises your eyebrow. You've never met Tudu Sin? Nope, the man says, slapping a tablet down. Someone else always brings the seal. Says he's sick, or traveling, or meditating in the hills every time. You chew that over as you walk back to the temple. A mysterious grain shipper who never appears in person. An increasing number of short shipments. Barleywigs. You're starting to feel less like a scribe and more like a very sleepy detective. Still, your job isn't to punish, just to record. So that's what you do. You inscribe the discrepancy in two different logs. One for daily dock records and one for monthly ration. You make it as clear as a wedge can be. If someone up the chain decides to investigate, they'll have your careful clay trail to follow. That night, while storing the new receipts in the temple archive, you pause by the shelves labeled with the king's seal. These are the serious records. Royal decrees, land allotments, temple audits. You can't help but wonder if one day your little barleywig receipt will end up here, immortalized, enshrined, filed under mystery of the missing measures. You place the tablet gently on the shelf, exhale, and step back. There's a strange kind of poetry in the work. Every error, every adjustment, every absent ship or fudged number, it all gets preserved. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real. In Sumer, receipts are the bones of civilization. And you're the one laying them down, one careful wedge at a time. Tomorrow, you might get reassigned to track oil, or wool, or sandal repairs. But for tonight, the grain is your domain, and you've written your truth in clay. You start the morning with ink-stained fingers and a sore back. Yesterday's barley fiasco is still echoing through the temple corridors. Scribes whispering about short shipments, priests grumbling over dwindling rations, and somewhere in the background, a cook refusing to serve stew with straw garnish. You can't blame them. But today, your task shifts. You're assigned to review a backlog of what the temple politely calls non-standard transactions. That's code for weird trades. Not the usual barley for oil swaps or labor wages. These are the edge cases, when someone traded a ceremonial goat for 3 pots of honey, or when a priest exchanged temple incense for an entire family of ducks. You sit in a dim corner of the archive, a stack of warped, flaking tablets beside you, each with its own strange little story. One of the first you pick up reads, 2 bronze fish hooks, traded for an entertainment performance by Dumuzi of Lagash, including music, jokes, and shadow puppets, witnessed by the beer administrator. You stare at it, blinking. These Sumerians didn't just track grain, they tracked vibes. You find another, dated to the festival of Inanna. 6 baskets of date cakes exchanged for night watch services provided by temple novices, duration unspecified. Unspecified? That's scandalous by receipt standards. Scribes like you are trained to account for everything. Who received what? From whom? In what quantity? On what day? Using what measure? And often, especially if it involved livestock, in what condition? 3 geese, 2 with clipped wings, 1 described as feisty. That's a real one. It's in your hands now. Historians still debate how precise these transactions truly were. Were the geese really feisty? Was that a euphemism for don't touch, it bites? Or did the scribe just enjoy adding flavor to an otherwise bland trade? There's a school of thought that ancient record keepers often added their own flair, not for utility, but for posterity. A kind of wink to future scribes. It's not hard to believe. After all, you once saw a receipt where a cow was described as generous-eyed. Who writes that unless they're having fun? One of the more confusing tablets you study today is entirely numeric. No names, no items, just sequences of numbers, each in orderly rows. You frown. A cipher, a tax code, a series of measurements. You bring it to Ninazak. She squints at the tablet, then shrugs. Could be temple dues, or a recipe, or a training tablet for new scribes. The numbers don't tell us what they're counting. That's the problem with numbers. Without nouns, they're just shapes. You nod, feeling that particular brand of historical frustration. You know something was important, but you'll never know what. It's like being handed a shopping list that just says 10, 3, 8, and hoping you don't come home with 10 bricks, 3 goats, and 8 regrets. Still, these edge case receipts tell you a lot about Sumerian life. Not the big official stuff, the tax codes, the royal grain quotas, but the little exchanges. The barter for a song, the goat paid for night watch, the feast where someone donated 12 loaves, 3 of which were still warm. Those moments feel human, real, and recording them wasn't just administrative. It was a way of saying, this happened. Even the weird stuff. You wonder what someone like Tudu Sin would make of these strange trades. Would he laugh at the music for fishhook deal, or would he too quietly scribble down that he once received a decorative headscarf in exchange for interpreting 2 unusual dreams? Because yes, that's a real one too. It's buried in a folder of temple barter logs, and you read it 3 times just to be sure. The farther you dig, the more surreal it becomes. One priest exchanged divine clarification services for a basket of onions. Another received a donkey, but returned it 2 days later due to excessive stubbornness. That return transaction? Documented, with a witness, probably annoyed. In some ways, you start to see receipts not just as tools of economy, but as tiny biographies. The people who made them left behind slices of themselves, preferences, complaints, even humor. And while historians may argue over the formal structure of Sumerian administration, one thing seems pretty clear. Even 5,000 years ago, people found ways to sneak personality into bureaucracy. You copy several of these curiosities onto a new tablet. It's not part of your formal assignment, but you feel compelled to preserve them. Call it a side project. Someday, someone might open this record and chuckle over 2 badges received in exchange for a prophecy. You know you did. As the sun slants low and the corridors fill with the smell of baked brick and spiced lentils, you pack up your tablet and stretch your aching legs. The city beyond the temple is waking up for the evening. People heading to market, children chasing each other past vendor stalls, someone loudly hawking fermented fish. You think about the person who once traded a harp lesson for a pair of sandals and wonder, What else got recorded deep in some dusty room that nobody's read for millennia? And what strange little mark might you leave behind, pressed gently into the clay of memory? You awake to the faint call of a market vendor hawking fresh figs. The day feels cooler, promising a gentle breeze that might ease your stiff shoulders. You grab your stylus and head to the temple's administrative wing, where a new assignment awaits. Today, you're to delve into the origins and evolution of the tally system itself, the ancestor of all those receipts cluttering your shelves. You sit among stacks of tablets tracing the history of simple tokens used for counting. These small clay balls, called bully, were the earliest method your ancestors devised to keep track of goods without writing. Inside each bulla, tiny shapes pressed into clay represented quantities: sheep, jars of oil, baskets of grain. Imagine a trader needing to transport barley to the city. Instead of carrying bulky logs, he'd place a matching number of tokens inside a sealed bulla to prove the cargo's contents. The seal itself guaranteed the contents hadn't been tampered with. Historians still argue whether these tokens were the first true receipts or merely primitive counting aids. Some scholars say they were just accounting tools, while others believe they were legally binding contracts in their own right. You prefer to think of them as the original to-go containers for information. You pick up a large, cracked bulla, impressed with tiny wedge-shaped imprints. It's surprisingly heavy for its size, and you imagine how painstaking it must have been to press each token inside before sealing the clay shut. You wonder if the trader ever lost one, and if so, how much barley vanished with it. Curiously, some bullae contain tokens shaped like animals that seem unrelated to trade, like tiny clay frogs or stylized birds. Maybe these were decorative or coded symbols known only to specific traders, or perhaps they were lucky charms, the ancient equivalent of tossing salt over your shoulder. No one knows for sure. You flip through tablets that describe the transition from tokens to written symbols. One early scribe devised simple pictographs to replace the physical tokens, speeding up the process. Instead of carrying a sealed ball, they could inscribe a drawing of a sheep or a jar of oil on a clay tablet. This saved space and made records more portable. Still, the earliest receipts were less about detailed lists and more about simple verification. This is what I promised to deliver, and this is what I received. Over time, those pictographs became increasingly abstract, evolving into the wedge-shaped script you use now. You think about how revolutionary that must have felt, to put a thought and agreement into a durable medium, so it could be read again and again. A promise pressed into clay. There's also a quirky detail. Some tablets show erased marks and corrections made by rescraping soft clay. Is the ancient version of undo, which scribes surely appreciated when their reed slipped or their hand trembled. You marvel at the continuity of it all, how something as simple as counting sheep evolved into complex contracts, trade agreements, and detailed grain receipts. And here you are, a direct link in that chain, adding your own wedge-shaped mark to the legacy. In your hand, the bulla feels warm from centuries of human touch. It connects you to thousands of traders, farmers, and scribes who once faced the same problem: how to make sure everyone remembers the deal. Tomorrow, you'll return to those grain receipts and the mysterious Sin saga. But for now, you take a deep breath and let yourself appreciate the humble beginnings of record keeping. It's a reminder. Sometimes the biggest inventions start small and round, and sometimes even hollow. You start the day by wandering through the temple's courtyard, watching as laborers unload heavy sacks and craftspeople barter for tools. The air smells faintly of baked clay and freshly cut reeds. You clutch your tablet, ready to continue your investigation into the ripple effects of early receipts, specifically how they shaped the social fabric of ancient Sumer. It turns out receipts weren't just dry financial records, they were essential threads in the tapestry of trust that held society together. Without them, disputes over debts, wages, or deliveries would have erupted like sudden desert storms, leaving chaos in their wake. You imagine a farmer arriving at the city gates with a cartload of dates, nervous but confident, because he carries a tablet sealed by the temple priest. That tiny piece of clay promises he'll be paid, or if he's owed grain in exchange, it guarantees he can claim it without hassle. These documents also empowered a new class of people, the scribes. You're well aware of your own peculiar prestige. As a scribe, you straddle worlds. Part bureaucrat, part storyteller, part detective. You're trusted to preserve the truth, but also to interpret the nuances between the lines. Interestingly, some receipts include clauses that feel surprisingly modern. For example, you find a tablet stipulating that if the grain isn't delivered on time, a penalty of 2 jars of oil must be paid. It's a contractual safeguard, a form of accountability. Historians still debate how widespread these legal clauses were. Did they apply mostly to elite merchants and temples, or did ordinary people rely on such written guarantees too? Evidence suggests that while elites certainly used detailed contracts, local markets relied more on oral agreements, sometimes sealed with a handshake or a shared meal. You flip to a tablet recording the wage of a female weaver, paid in barley and cloth. The receipt notes her skill level, years of service, and even a comment about her gentle hands. That phrase strikes you. An example of a scribe adding personality, a tiny nod to the worker's humanity. In another folder, you find a fascinating record from a long-forgotten provincial town. It lists the various odd jobs performed by a group of temple servants during a festival, carrying incense, organizing processions, and even collecting lost sandals. That last one brings a rare smile to your face. Even 5,000 years ago, sandal loss was a festival hazard. Your curiosity piqued. You study the impact these receipts had on gender roles. Women appear regularly in trade and service records, but often in ways that highlight their social constraints. For example, some tablets specify that women's wages were paid through male relatives, hinting at limitations on their financial independence. Yet, there are exceptions. You discover a rare tablet naming a woman who managed her own estate and hired workers. This challenges assumptions about female agency in ancient Sumer and offers a glimpse into a more complex society. The receipts also reveal how intertwined economic and religious life was. Many transactions involved temple offerings or payments to priests. The temple was the hub of the community, both spiritually and financially. You're reminded again how the invention of receipts was not just an administrative breakthrough, but a cultural one. It created a shared language, symbols pressed into clay that transcended generations, making promises visible and lasting. As the sun begins to set, you store your tablets carefully, your mind buzzing with new insights. You realize that each receipt is a window into daily life, into hopes, obligations, and sometimes the small, quirky details that make history human. Tomorrow, you'll dive deeper into the role of seals in securing these transactions. For now, you take comfort in the idea that long ago, amidst dust and barley, people just like you sought order in a messy world, one careful mark at a time. You find yourself drawn back to the quiet of the temple archives, the scent of old clay, and faint reed smoke wrapping around you like a soft blanket. Today's task is all about the seals. The little stamps pressed into clay that transformed simple receipts into secure contracts. These seals weren't just practical tools, they were signatures, guarantees, and sometimes tiny works of art. holding a small cylindrical seal carved from lapis lazuli. You marvel at its intricate design. A mythological lion entwined with a palm tree, symbols of power and fertility. Pressing it gently into a lump of soft clay, you leave a perfect imprint, as a scribe might have done millennia ago. Each seal was unique, often personalized for individuals or families, making forgery more difficult. You imagine a merchant nervously handing over a tablet sealed by a rival trader. The seal guarantees authenticity, but also carries a subtle message. This is my word, and I stake my reputation on it. Historians still debate the extent to which seals functioned legally versus ceremonially. Were they simply decorative, or did their presence grant a document official status? Some argue seals were essential in court disputes, while others see them as social markers, symbols of identity and authority more than legal tools. You discover that seals could also be used to mark containers, like jars of oil or baskets of dates, ensuring their contents remained untampered during transport. The cracked jars and mysterious disappearances you read about in some receipts may have been prevented with a well placed seal. Among the archives, you find a peculiar case. A receipt for a shipment of fine textiles, stamped with a seal showing a smiling goat wearing a crown. This whimsical image contrasts sharply with the more formal and stern designs typical of the era. Perhaps the owner had a sense of humor or wanted to stand out in a sea of serious contracts. The seals also tell stories about social status. High officials used elaborate, finely carved seals, while common traders had simpler designs. Women sometimes used personal seals, suggesting they had a recognized economic role, though their seals tend to be less documented. You're intrigued by the debate around who exactly controlled the seals. Were they tightly guarded family heirlooms or more widely used by scribes? Some tablets indicate that scribes held temporary custody, stamping documents on behalf of others, which implies a level of trust and official duty. You think about the physicality of the seals, the smooth lapis, the weight of carved stone, the precise pressure needed to leave a clear impression. Each press was deliberate, a quiet ceremony binding parties to their agreements. There's even evidence some seals had hidden compartments or were double sided, allowing for secret marks or multiple impressions. You smile at the idea of ancient spy seals, used to convey hidden messages or verify authenticity in complex trade networks. As you press the seal into soft clay one last time today, you reflect on how this simple device secured not only goods, but relationships, promises, and trust across a sprawling civilization. In the world of the ancient Sumerians, a seal was more than just a mark. It was a handshake, a signature, and a piece of personal identity pressed into history. The sun begins to dip low outside the archive's window, casting long shadows over piles of tablets. You settle in to explore the human stories behind these ancient receipts. Who used them and how their lives intertwined with this early record keeping. First, you picture the traders and merchants bustling through the crowded streets of Ur and Uruk. Their livelihoods depended on accurate records, without which business would be as chaotic as a goat parade in a grain field. You imagine their day to day struggles, haggling over prices, negotiating debts, or chasing down delayed deliveries, all with a clay tablet tucked safely under one arm. These receipts gave them a form of protection. If a shipment arrived damaged or short, the tablet was proof of the original agreement. It might save them from a dispute, or escalate one if someone challenged the record's authenticity. You find records of middlemen or brokers who acted as trusted intermediaries in trade. They negotiated deals, ensured payments, and helped navigate the complex network of markets spreading across Mesopotamia. An intriguing fringe detail. Some receipts mention gift exchanges, disguised as trade transactions, perhaps a way to curry favor or smooth political alliances, blurring the lines between commerce and diplomacy. Historians still debate whether these were purely economic or had ritual significance. Then you look at the farmers whose barley and dates form the backbone of the economy. Receipts documented not just sales, but also grain rations given to workers or temple servants. This system was a form of social welfare, a way of distributing resources within the community. Women appear in these records too, often as workers, weavers, or even landowners. Their names, though less frequent, remind you that they were active participants in economic life despite living in a patriarchal society. You notice a receipt listing payments to a group of temple musicians who performed during festivals. Their wages were paid partly in grain and partly in oil, ingredients essential to daily survival and ritual. You chuckle softly, imagining ancient musicians receiving their paycheck in the form of edible goods and thinking, well, at least I'm well fed. It's a reminder that money as we know it was a long way off, and barter or goods were the currency of the day. Another curious detail, some tablets record fines paid in livestock or labor hours, rather than grain or silver. This barter system was flexible but complicated, requiring careful documentation to avoid confusion. You think about the scribes who wrote these receipts, often under the watchful eye of temple priests or officials. They were guardians of truth, yet sometimes caught in political intrigue or economic disputes. There's a debate about how impartial scribes were. Did they simply record facts, or did they sometimes massage the numbers to favor powerful patrons? The surviving evidence is inconclusive, but you suspect a bit of both. These receipts aren't just business papers, they're snapshots of human lives, of hopes, frustrations, and everyday moments frozen in time. As you close your tablet for the day, you feel a connection to those ancient. The sun begins to dip low outside the archives window, casting long shadows over piles of tablets. You settle in to explore the human stories behind these ancient receipts. Who used them and how their lives intertwined with this early record keeping. First, you picture the traders and merchants bustling through the crowded streets of Ur and Uruk. Their livelihoods depended on accurate records, without which business would be as chaotic as a goat parade in a grain field. You imagine their day-to-day struggles, haggling over prices, negotiating debts, or chasing down delayed deliveries, all with a clay tablet tucked safely under one arm. These receipts gave them a form of protection. If a shipment arrived damaged or short, the tablet was proof of the original agreement. It might save them from a dispute, or escalate one if someone challenged the record's authenticity. You find records of middlemen or brokers who acted as trusted intermediaries in trade. They negotiated deals, ensured payments, and helped navigate the complex network of markets spreading across Mesopotamia. An intriguing fringe detail. Some receipts mention gift exchanges, disguised as trade transactions, perhaps a way to curry favor or smooth political alliances, blurring the lines between commerce and diplomacy. Historians still debate whether these were purely economic or had ritual significance. Then you look at the farmers whose barley and dates form the backbone of the economy. Receipts documented not just sales, but also grain rations given to workers or temple servants. This system was a form of social welfare, a way of distributing resources within the community. Women appear in these records too, often as workers, weavers, or even landowners. Their names, though less frequent, remind you that they were active participants in economic life, despite living in a patriarchal society. You notice a receipt listing payments to a group of temple musicians who performed during festivals. Their wages were paid partly in grain and partly in oil, ingredients essential to daily survival and ritual. You chuckle softly, imagining ancient musicians receiving their paycheck in the form of edible goods and thinking, well, at least I'm well fed. It's a reminder that money as we know it was a long way off, and barter or goods were the currency of the day. Another curious detail, some tablets record fines paid in livestock or labor hours, rather than grain or silver. This barter system was flexible but complicated, requiring careful documentation to avoid confusion. You think about the scribes who wrote these receipts, often under the watchful eye of temple priests or officials. They were guardians of truth, yet sometimes caught in political intrigue or economic disputes. There's a debate about how impartial scribes were. Did they simply record facts, or did they sometimes massage the numbers to favor powerful patrons? The surviving evidence is inconclusive, but you suspect a bit of both. These receipts aren't just business papers, they're snapshots of human lives, of hopes, frustrations, and everyday moments frozen in time. As you close your tablet for the day, you feel a connection to those ancient people navigating a world of trust, exchange, and record keeping, much like yourself. Tomorrow, you'll explore how these receipts influenced law and governance. But for now, you rest with the thought that every wedge shaped mark is a whisper from the past, inviting you to listen closely. The archive feels cooler as evening approaches, shadows stretching across stacks of clay tablets. You settle in to examine how early receipts became more than just economic tools. They started shaping law and governance in ancient Sumer. You imagine the city council gathered in the ziggurat's cool stone chamber, debating disputes brought forward by merchants and citizens alike. Receipts, with their pressed seals and cuneiform notations, became vital evidence in resolving conflicts, from unpaid debts to property claims. You study tablets recording legal decisions, where the judges cite receipts to enforce contracts or levy fines. This early legal bureaucracy relied heavily on written proof, which helped shift power from oral tradition to documented law. Interestingly, some receipts include clauses resembling modern legal jargon. For example, you find one specifying no excuses accepted for late delivery, indicating clear contractual terms and consequences. Yet historians still argue whether these written records truly reduced disputes or simply formalized existing social hierarchies. Did common folk have real access to legal redress, or were these laws tools of the elite? You discover that temples often acted as both religious centers and legal authorities. Temple officials oversaw transactions and mediated conflicts, blurring spiritual and administrative roles. One tablet details a case where a farmer disputes the amount of barley owed. The judge references a sealed receipt and rules in favor of the temple's grain storehouse, reinforcing institutional authority. You find receipts listing official tax payments. These documents show how the government used record keeping to collect resources for public projects like irrigation canals, city walls, and festivals. You ponder how this early bureaucracy relied on trust in scribes and seals. If a receipt was lost or forged, chaos could ensue. So layers of verification evolved. Multiple witnesses, repeated copies, and the use of bullae to protect tokens representing goods. A quirky tidbit. Some legal tablets bear cursed formulas, warnings that anyone who falsifies documents will face divine punishment. It's an early attempt to discourage fraud with a bit of supernatural deterrence. You smile, imagining a scribe muttering under their breath, "Better not mess with the goddess of justice, or you'll have more than a fine to worry about." These early legal systems were the scaffolding for later, more complex codes like Hammurabi's famous law book. But even here, you see the roots of formal justice intertwined with personal reputation, social status, and religion. As night falls outside, you reflect on how ancient receipts transcended mere bookkeeping. They became tools of fairness, power, and social order. Tomorrow, you will explore the remarkable journey of how these early receipts influenced trade far beyond Sumer. But for now, the quiet stillness in the archives lulls you to consider the enduring legacy of these tiny clay records. The faint glow of dawn filters into the archive as you prepare to follow the trail of Sumerian receipts beyond their home city states, tracing their surprising influence on ancient trade networks stretching far and wide. You picture caravans winding their way through dusty deserts and fertile river valleys, laden with sacks of grain, bundles of textiles, and jars of precious oil. Alongside them travel scribes armed with their stylus and clay tablets, recording each transaction in meticulous detail. Receipts, once a local invention, now facilitate complex exchanges between distant cultures. You discover evidence of Sumerian-style tablets found as far away as Anatolia and the Persian Gulf, proving the system's reach and adaptability. These tablets offer a fascinating glimpse into early globalization, a web of merchants, temples, and officials connected by a shared language of trade and record keeping. You find mention of merchants exchanging exotic goods, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar wood from Lebanon, and bitumen for construction, each trade documented with a receipt that was as vital as the goods themselves. Historians debate how much of this trade was direct versus conducted through intermediaries. Some scholars argue that the clay tablet system helped create standardized practices, easing misunderstandings across language and cultural barriers. A quirky detail: some tablets contain courier receipts, showing how messages and goods traveled in relay systems like ancient express mail, often secured by seals to prevent tampering. You also uncover receipts for dowry payments, accompanying marriage alliances between city-states, blending commerce and social customs in a delicate dance of diplomacy. The scribe's role evolved too. Beyond recording sales, they became trusted intermediaries, translators, and sometimes even financial advisors to merchants navigating this growing market. Interestingly, some receipts show signs of being copied or recopied in different languages, including Sumerian, Akkadian, and Elamite, highlighting the multicultural nature of ancient commerce. You ponder the stress of being a traveling merchant, balancing fragile tablets, fragile reputations, and the ever-present risk of theft or loss. A dropped clay tablet could mean losing your proof of a deal and your livelihood. The widespread use of receipts helped build trust, forming the invisible infrastructure that underpinned long-distance trade long before paper or money existed. You close the tablet softly, feeling the pulse of early globalization beating through these records, a reminder that humans have always found ways to connect, exchange, and document their lives. Tomorrow, you'll explore how this ancient system influenced record-keeping innovations across history. But for now, you rest with the thought that every trade, every tablet, was a small step toward the world we know today. Morning light filters softly through the archive's narrow window as you turn your attention to the ripple effects of Sumerian receipts on later civilizations. How did these tiny clay tablets inspire the evolution of record keeping through the ages? You imagine scribes in the neighboring Akkadian Empire studying Sumerian tablets, adapting their wedge-shaped script and accounting methods to suit their own expanding empire. These innovations didn't stay put. They spread like quiet ripples across Mesopotamia and beyond. You find that the Babylonians, Assyrians, and later the Hittites refined these early receipts into complex legal and commercial documents, building on Sumerian foundations while introducing their own twists, like detailed interest calculations or formalized contract clauses. Historians still debate how much of this development was gradual borrowing versus outright innovation, but the clear lineage is undeniable. You discover evidence that the use of sealed tablets influenced even early Egyptian record keeping, though their writing systems and materials were quite different. The idea of securing information through a physical imprint or signature crossed cultural boundaries. A fun little detail: some Hittite tablets humorously record complaints about scribes who made mistakes or delayed their work. It's a rare glimpse into the frustrations behind the scenes of bureaucracy, ancient customer service, issues, if you will. You imagine a scribe grumbling, if only these clay tablets came with an undo button. Over time, as writing materials evolved, from clay to papyrus, parchment, and eventually paper, the principle of documenting transactions endured. Receipts became smaller, lighter, and more portable, but maintained their legal and economic functions. You trace a line from these humble beginnings to later medieval European receipts sealed with wax and ribbons, still performing the same basic job, proving who agreed to what, when, and under which conditions. You come across early accounting methods that eventually gave rise to bookkeeping systems in Renaissance Italy, the birthplace of modern double entry bookkeeping. It's humbling to realize that these sophisticated financial systems owed their roots to Sumerian farmers and merchants hammering out receipts in the mud thousands of years ago. There's an open scholarly question about how much knowledge transfer was direct versus parallel invention across regions. Did European merchants consciously build on ancient Mesopotamian models, or did similar economic needs lead to similar solutions independently? Regardless, the echo of those early clay receipts resonates through history, reminding you how foundational record keeping is to human civilization. As you carefully place the tablet back on the shelf, you feel a gentle appreciation for the scribes who, day after day, carved their quiet marks into clay, shaping the very way we manage promises and exchange today. Tomorrow, you'll dive into some of the quirkiest Sumerian receipts, odd items, and unusual transactions that reveal the colorful side of ancient commerce. But for now, the slow ticking of time lulls you into a soft calm. The soft rustle of pages and the scent of old clay fill the quiet archive as you delve into the more unusual side of Sumerian receipts. Not everything recorded was serious business. Sometimes, the transactions were downright quirky, revealing a lighter side of ancient life. You uncover a receipt documenting the sale of a donkey, but alongside it is a note about the animal's stubborn temperament, almost like a buyer's warning. It's ancient honesty with a dash of humor. Buyer beware. Style. Another tablet details the payment for a feast, listing not only food and drink but also payments to entertainers, including a professional lamenter whose job was to wail dramatically at funerals. It's like ancient event planning, receipts and all. You smile, picturing a Sumerian merchant grumbling, "Did we really need to pay for a professional crier? I guess it's part of the package." Oddly specific receipts pop up too. One records the sale of a basket of onions described as fresh and tear-inducing. Another lists a quantity of fine wool for making cozy cloaks, reminding you that comfort mattered even back then. Historians still argue whether some of these descriptive notes were standard practice or scribal flourishes meant to entertain or curry favor. You come across receipts for rental of pets, like a prized hunting dog or a racing pigeon. It's a glimpse into a world where animals could be borrowed temporarily, just like tools or fields. An especially curious receipt details a loan of a servant girl to another household for a few months, sparking debates among scholars about social status, gender roles, and the nature of servitude in Sumerian society. You imagine the conversations around that transaction, with all the complexities and human stories hidden behind dry numbers. There's also a receipt documenting a payment made in barley and beer to a temple worker, which you find amusing Beer as salary might sound like a dream job to some. The use of beer as currency reminds you that Sumerians didn't just trade goods, but also relied on communal and ritual practices to cement social bonds. You ponder the day to day lives of those scribes tasked with recording all this detail. Perhaps they had favorite stories or odd receipts they shared during breaks, ancient office gossip, if you will. These quirky receipts add color and personality to the otherwise utilitarian world of clay tablets, reminding you that behind every record was a human being with hopes, quirks, and a sense of humor. As twilight descends, you tuck these stories away, feeling a warm connection across millennia to the lively, messy, and very human world of ancient commerce. Tomorrow, you'll continue by exploring how the development of receipts influenced literacy and education in Sumer. But for now, you settle into the soothing rhythm of history's gentle flow. The slow, steady ticking of a distant clock blends with the soft rustle of clay tablets as you begin to explore how the invention of receipts influenced literacy and education in ancient Sumer. You picture a dimly lit schoolroom called an eduba, where young students sit cross legged on mats, intently tracing wedge shaped marks into soft clay. Their teacher, a stern but patient scribe, watches closely as they copy economic texts, including receipts. These receipts weren't just dry records, they were central learning tools, providing students with real world examples of writing's practical value. Memorizing and replicating them helped students master the complex cuneiform script, which was no easy feat. You imagine a student's frustration. Why memorize a list of barley sales when I could be out running around? Yet, the skill of reading and writing receipts meant access to careers in administration, temple service, and trade. You find that learning to write receipts was a rite of passage for many, shaping literacy rates among the elite and bureaucratic classes. Some scholars argue that this practical education laid the groundwork for the first accountants and financial managers. Interestingly, certain receipts were deliberately complex, almost like puzzles, to challenge students and test their understanding of math and language. You can almost hear a young apprentice mumbling, "Why does this barley transaction have so many numbers?" The training involved not only language but also arithmetic, calculating weights, measures, and values, sometimes involving fractions and percentages. This was a full bodied education blending literacy and numeracy. Historians still debate how widespread literacy really was, but it's clear that receipt writing played a crucial role in expanding the reach of written language beyond religious or poetic texts. You find records of Scrabble competitions where students would compete to produce the most accurate or elegantly written receipts. The winner might earn praise or even a reward of barley or oil, a coveted prize. A quirky detail: some apprentice scribes practiced by inscribing receipts on broken pottery shards called ostraka, much like doodling on scraps. You smile, picturing frustrated students trying to perfect their strokes on less than perfect surfaces. You also uncover evidence that some women, particularly from elite families, were trained to write, likely managing household accounts and receipts, an early form of domestic literacy. This blending of education, economy, and daily life helped cement the importance of receipts in Sumerian society, far beyond simple bookkeeping. As you lean back, the thought settles in. These early classrooms, filled with the quiet tapping of styluses on clay, were where the seeds of written culture took firm root. Tomorrow, you'll journey into the role of temple economies and their vast use of receipts. But for now, the rhythmic tapping of history lulls you softly onward. The warm glow of the evening sun filters through the mud brick walls as you shift focus to the temple economies. Ancient Sumer's bustling centers of wealth and power where receipts flourished like grains in a storehouse. floors. You imagine the temple compound alive with activity, priests chanting softly, laborers hauling baskets of grain, merchants arriving with bundles of wool. The temple wasn't just a religious site. It was a massive economic hub managing vast resources. Receipts were the lifeblood of this system, documenting everything from the intake of tithes to the distribution of rations. These clay tablets became crucial records of offerings, payments, and even labor obligations owed to the temple. You discover that temples issued receipts for sacrifices made by worshippers, including livestock and produce. These documents ensured the temple's administrators accounted properly for incoming goods, essential for both religious rites and economic planning. Interestingly, some receipts include detailed lists of goods dedicated to specific gods, showing the close intertwining of faith and finance. You find tablets recording temple workers' wages, paid in barley, beer, or silver. It's a vivid reminder that even the spiritual workforce needed earthly compensation. Historians still argue how much temples controlled the wider economy. Were they monopolistic powerhouses or just one player in a complex market? Either way, their record keeping was impressively advanced. One quirky note: some receipts document temporary loans of temple owned donkeys and tools to farmers, showing a surprisingly flexible system of resource sharing. You also uncover evidence that temples acted as early banks, safeguarding deposits and managing loans secured by receipts, a precursor to financial institutions we know today. You imagine the pressure on scribes to keep these records flawless. A lost or damaged receipt could cause disputes or accusations of theft, so careful record keeping was paramount. You pause to consider how this temple-centered economy likely influenced social structures, reinforcing power hierarchies but also providing stability and order. The temple receipts also served a public function, displaying trustworthiness and accountability to both gods and people. As dusk deepens, you appreciate how these early clay records weren't just paperwork. They were pillars supporting one of the world's first complex economies. Tomorrow, you'll look at how receipts helped ordinary Sumerians navigate everyday life beyond temples. But for now, the slow rhythm of history whispers softly around you. The evening air cools as you turn your attention from grand temple economies to the quieter rhythms of everyday life in Sumer, where receipts quietly shaped ordinary routines and relationships. You picture a bustling marketplace, the scent of fresh bread mingling with the tang of salted fish, where farmers, weavers, and potters exchange goods with careful negotiation. Receipts slip between hands like secret promises. Small merchants rely on these clay tablets to prove debts, track payments, or guarantee future deliveries. For many, a receipt is more than a document. It's a lifeline ensuring fairness in a world without banks or credit cards. You find examples of receipts for tiny purchases like a handful of garlic cloves or a loaf of barley bread, reminding you that even the smallest transactions mattered. One receipt records a baker's sale to a local household, detailing the exact number of loaves and their quality. Crispy crust, soft crumb. It notes almost poetically. Historians still debate how widespread receipt usage was among the common folk versus just merchants and officials. Some suggest tablets were sometimes too bulky for everyday buyers, while others propose clay tokens or simpler marks were used alongside written receipts. You discover a fascinating tidbit about proxy receipts, where a family member or friend acted as a stand-in buyer or seller, recorded on the tablet to avoid confusion. You also find receipts documenting rental agreements for homes or fields, showing how Sumerians managed property and temporary ownership, a precursor to modern leases. In some cases, receipts list penalties or fines for damaged goods or late payments, indicating an early legal framework supporting commerce and fairness. A particularly charming receipt notes payment in woven mats as rent, showing that barter and trade blended seamlessly with recorded debts. You imagine the social dance behind these receipts, the trust, negotiations, and occasional disagreements, all framed within a system of accountability. The tactile nature of clay tablets may have encouraged care and seriousness in transactions, lending a weighty sense of commitment. You think about the daily life of an average Sumerian, managing family affairs, buying goods, settling debts, all linked through these quiet clay documents. This glimpse into ordinary transactions makes the ancient world feel close, familiar, and unexpectedly cozy. Tomorrow, you'll delve into the role of seals and signatures that authenticated these receipts. But for now, the soft scratch of styluses on clay fades gently into the night. The quiet hum of the archive accompanies you as you focus now on the fascinating role of seals and signatures in authenticating Sumerian receipts, transforming simple clay tablets into trusted documents of record. You envision a scribe carefully pressing a small cylinder seal, carved with intricate animals or mythic scenes, into a soft tablet's edge. This tiny act serves as the ancient equivalent of a handwritten signature or company stamp, vouching for the receipt's authenticity. These seals weren't just practical tools, they were personal identifiers, often uniquely designed to represent an individual's status, profession, or family. You imagine a wealthy merchant seal featuring a proud lion, while a humble farmer's might show a sprig of barley. Seals could also act as a security measure, preventing tampering or forgery. Once impressed, any attempt to alter the tablet would break the seal, signaling fraud. Historians still debate whether seals were always used by the parties involved or sometimes only by official scribes, but their presence undeniably added authority to transactions. You discover receipts sealed with multiple impressions, sometimes from buyer and seller, or from a witness, highlighting the communal nature of ancient agreements. Some seals bore images that hint at mythology, like gods or protective spirits, perhaps invoked to bless or guarantee the contract's fulfillment. Interestingly, you find receipts where the seal itself became a record of ownership changes, stamped anew as goods passed hands, like an ancient chain of custody. You ponder the artistry involved. Each cylinder seal was a miniature masterpiece, crafted painstakingly by skilled artisans, reflecting a blend of utility and aesthetic beauty. A quirky detail emerges. A receipt showing a seal accidentally pressed upside down, prompting a joke among scholars about the scribe's bad day or clumsy merchant. You also find evidence that seals were kept on strings or worn as amulets, merging function with personal identity and perhaps even superstition. This tactile connection between the signer and the document deepens your appreciation for the human element behind the bureaucratic veneer. The seals remind you that even thousands of years ago, people wanted proof they could trust, a sentiment as old as civilization itself. As you lay down the tablet gently, you feel a comforting link across time. The ancient desire for trust, clarity, and accountability remains woven into our modern world. Tomorrow, you'll explore how receipts intersected with Sumerian law and justice. But for now, the slow imprint of history presses softly on your mind. The quiet of the evening deepens as you turn toward the ways in which Sumerian receipts intertwined with law and justice. How these clay tablets form the backbone of legal claims and dispute resolution in ancient courts. You picture a bustling courtroom in a mud brick building, where a judge listens patiently as parties argue over a disputed debt or ownership claim. clay tablets laid out as evidence on a low table. Receipts were vital here. They provided written proof, a physical record of agreements that could be called upon to settle disagreements without endless bickering. You imagine a farmer contesting a payment recorded on a tablet, insisting that the barley was subpar or the delivery late, while a merchant counters with a sealed receipt as cold and clear as the Tigris River. Historians still debate how formalized Sumerian legal procedures were. But it's clear that clay tablets with receipts were central to many court decisions. You uncover cases where judges referenced specific receipts to confirm contracts, enforce fines, or even settle inheritances, showing that these tablets carried the weight of the law. One quirky example involves a receipt for a loan of silver, where the interest terms were so confusing that the judge reportedly had to summon scribes to clarify the math. A reminder that ancient bureaucracy could be just as complicated as today. You discover that sometimes scribes or officials acted as mediators, crafting receipts carefully to avoid future conflicts, almost like ancient legal advisors. In some instances, the physical damage or missing seals on a receipt could void a contract, illustrating the legal importance of these clay tablets' integrity. You imagine the pressure on scribes to get every detail right, not just for economic accuracy but for legal validity, making their work a delicate blend of accountant and notary. Receipts also occasionally recorded settlements of disputes, marking the resolution of conflicts, a practice hinting at early restorative justice principles. The presence of such documentation reflects a sophisticated legal culture that valued written proof over hearsay or brute force. You sense how this system brought order and predictability to Sumerian society, reducing chaos and fostering trust. As you fold away these thoughts, you feel a quiet respect for the scribes and judges whose work ensured that justice was recorded as carefully as barley. Tomorrow, you'll explore the decline of clay receipts and the transition to new materials and systems. For now, the slow, steady beat of history soothes your mind. As twilight settles softly, you turn your thoughts to the gradual decline of clay receipts and the transition toward new materials and systems in the ancient world, a change both subtle and profound. You picture bustling workshops where scribes begin experimenting with alternative writing surfaces, smooth pieces of baked clay, thin sheets of wax, and even early forms of papyrus imported from distant lands. Receipts, once heavy and fragile, started to evolve into lighter, more portable formats. This shift wasn't just about convenience. It signaled broader changes in administration, trade, and communication. You imagine merchants traveling farther than ever before, carrying receipts that wouldn't break or crumble in the heat, making long-distance commerce more feasible. Historians still argue about how quickly and widely these new materials replaced traditional clay tablets, with some regions holding on to older methods longer than others. One intriguing find is a receipt inscribed on a wooden board coated with wax, allowing corrections and reuses, sort of the ancient world's version of track changes in a document. You come across evidence of ink and reed pens being used on these early documents, marking the beginnings of a major technological leap in writing. The transition also hints at increasing literacy and bureaucratic complexity. More people beyond scribes might have accessed or handled these receipts, slowly democratizing record keeping. You discover some receipts from this transitional period, combining both clay tablets and newer materials, showing a blend of tradition and innovation. Interestingly, the new materials allowed for more detailed illustrations and annotations, which clay's limitations had restricted. You ponder how these advances likely shaped the growth of empires, facilitating administration across vast territories and diverse populations. Despite the shift, clay receipts didn't disappear overnight. They remained in use alongside new media for generations, a testament to their enduring utility. You consider how this evolution parallels modern shifts from paper to digital, making the ancient transition feel surprisingly familiar. As you let this thought settle, you feel the soft rhythm of progress unfolding, change as a gentle tide rather than a sudden wave. Tomorrow, you'll explore the legacy of Sumerian receipts and their echoes in later civilizations. But for now, the past's quiet transformation hums soothingly around you. The night deepens as you reflect on the lasting legacy of Sumerian receipts, the subtle threads connecting those ancient clay tablets to the vast tapestry of later civilizations, record keeping, and commerce. You picture a long historical chain stretching across millennia, with Babylonian, Assyrian, and even Egyptian scribes adopting and adapting the Sumerians' pioneering methods. Receipts evolved in form and language but retained their core purpose to guarantee trust, clarify agreements, and make commerce legible. You imagine a Babylonian merchant leafing through cuneiform tablets similar in style to Sumerian receipts, tracing a tradition born in the cradle of civilization. Interestingly, you find traces of the Sumerian receipt system influencing the later development of alphabetic scripts, which would eventually lead to our modern letters and numbers. Historians still debate the degree to which Sumerian administrative practices directly shaped later empires, but the continuity is undeniable. You uncover records from the Neo Assyrian Empire showing remarkably detailed economic documents, likely descended from those early clay tablets. The receipts' role expanded beyond trade, influencing taxation, legal contracts, and even early bookkeeping methods that prefigure modern accounting. A quirky note surfaces. Some later receipts included tiny sketches or doodles as shorthand, a playful nod to the tactile creativity of their Sumerian ancestors. You also reflect on how the idea of proof of transaction lives on today in digital receipts, emails, and contracts, echoing those first clay tablets pressed with care thousands of years ago. This lineage reminds you that the need for clarity and trust in human exchange is a constant, gently shaping societies. You sense that these humble clay tablets were more than just economic tools. They were silent witnesses to the unfolding story of civilization itself. As your thoughts drift, you appreciate the quiet but profound impact of this ancient invention on how humans relate, negotiate, and remember. Tomorrow, you will bring the journey home with a gentle closing reflection. But now, the legacy of Sumer's receipts settles like a soft whisper in the night air. The world around you grows hushed as you gently draw this long journey through ancient Sumerian history to a close, savoring the soft echoes of clay tablets pressed with delicate care so many millennia ago. You feel yourself slipping deeper into the quiet fold of time, where the past's steady heartbeat pulses softly beneath the surface of modern life. Those early receipts, once just simple records of grain or goods exchanged, now shimmer like faint stars connecting us to the very dawn of civilization's written word. You imagine the scribes, their fingers coated in clay dust, carefully shaping each tablet not only as a practical tool but as a lasting mark of human ingenuity. There's a tender poetry in the thought that such small artifacts carried so much weight. Trust between strangers, the promise of fairness, the scaffolding of early economies. As your breath slows, you sense the persistence of this ancient impulse to record, to remember, to create order from chaos, flowing through time into your own world. The quiet scratching of styluses on tablets blends with the rustle of leaves outside, weaving a soothing rhythm that lulls you gently toward rest. It's comforting to realize that even thousands of years ago, people wrestled with the same challenges we do how to make sense of complexity, how to honor agreements, how to trust others. You are part of a long line of humanity, connected by these fragile clay pages of history, each impression a whisper reaching across the ages. Now, as your eyes grow heavy, allow yourself to drift on this soft current of stories and discoveries carried safely through time by those ancient hands. Feel the calm settle around you, a warm cloak woven from history's slow, patient unfolding. Rest now, knowing you have traveled far through temples, markets, courts, and archives to glimpse the quiet origins of trust and record. Tomorrow the world will awaken anew, but for now, surrender to the gentle night. Sweet dreams.